Darth Kermit here with an update video on the best teams for Challenge Pit 2.0. Things did change a bit, but not as much as I expected. So I'm going to change things up a bit on this end and focus more on which teams make for the best overall lineup to maximize the use of a full roster, and less on which teams get the absolute highest score. But before I get into it, if you like my videos, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and support me on Patreon for written guides, mod profiles, and other perks. Or just because you want me to keep making videos. Okay, let's get to Phase 1. Now the first thing to know is that there are quite a few teams that do well in Phases 1 through 3, but there are a few teams that are absolutely dependent on the topple in Phases 2 and 3. So we want to prioritize other teams in Phase 1 so we can save those topples for teams that would otherwise be fairly useless. On top of this, these teams all do slightly more damage in Phase 1 anyway, so it's fine. However, there are some decisions to be made depending on your particular roster, such that you may want to use some of these teams in Phase 2 or 3, just so you can save certain characters for other teams. In particular, we need to decide where to use the following characters that are integral to multiple particular teams: Crew, Watt, 3PO, Shaak Ti, Thrawn, and Hermit Yoda. Then, aside from those two concerns, there are a few teams that just do far better in Phase 1 than elsewhere. First up, even though Slacker with Watt and Thrawn is still the highest damage team, first place this time is actually Slacker Sisters. I personally hate this team because of how much RNG it has, but it does almost as much damage as the Slacker Watt Thrawn lineup, and frees up Crew and Watt to be used with Vader, which means you can do more damage overall between the two teams. On top of that, this team carries over better between Phases 1 and 2, so if you're able to get in at the end of Phase 1, this team can also do a ton of damage in Phase 2, which will get you a higher overall score as well. Nothing has really changed in how to run this team since the changes, so my previous video on this team should work just fine. Next up is Vader. This team unfortunately uses up 3 to 4 of those key flex characters, but it does a solid 13 to 14% and seems to make the most use of those characters. The optimal lineup so far is Vader, Crew, Watt, 3PO, and BB-8, but you can make some substitutions, though any substitution will cost you some damage. You can sub out 3PO or BB-8 for Shaak Ti or Hoda, and you can sub out Crew for Malak. This team does play fairly differently than before the changes. You actually want Vader to be very slow now so he doesn't do too much damage before getting off one huge culling blade. With the optimal lineup, you should aim for 50 or more dots before using Merciless Massacre and Culling Blade. Without the optimal lineup, try to get 40 plus. This team is top of my list for an updated video guide, but with most of the challenge gone from the challenge pit, I'm not sure when I'll get to it. Third is a bit of a new one. Sith Eternal, Marauder, plus 3 Sith. I recommend at least EP for the offense up, and Sid for some decent damage after ult plus extra debuffs for Marauder. Bastila Fallen is also good for some extra debuffs too. This is not an amazing team, only 4 to 6%, but it'll give you something to do with characters that are otherwise useless in this raid. Because there are adds in Phase 1, you can actually get Sith Eternal into ult. When this happens, it will double the mastery of all the Sith, which will make Marauder hit even harder. So try to get some extra debuffs out there with Sidious or whoever else right before getting off a big hit with Marauder, and then throw some decent lightning damage out there with Papa Palps while the pigs murder your team. Honorable mentions. Padme with Galactic Republic still works better here than elsewhere, as does Gas 501st. Just save 3PO for Vader. Again, I'm going to keep Phases 2 and 3 together, but I'm going to split the teams up into topple teams, e.g. those that only do well with a topple, and non-topple teams, those that still do okay without the topple. Keep in mind that all teams do better with a topple, it's just that some teams absolutely require it and others don't. First up for topple teams is Imperial Troopers. As long as you have Veers and Piet plus 3 other troopers, you can do some solid damage with this team during topple. The best lineup that I've seen so far is Veers, Piet, Gideon, Dark Trooper, and Stark. There's some argument about which is better between Stark and Range Trooper, but so far Stark seems best, and of course if you don't have Dark Trooper at R5 yet, I sure don't, then Range Trooper is optimal in that spot. This team is all about getting in a bunch of mass assists during topple to build up stacks of Emperor's Trap and do a bunch of damage during that topple. Dark Trooper hits super hard, but this team can still do as much as 7% even without Dark Trooper. Next up is Aura Singh with Bounty Hunters. Aura has the easiest contract to fulfill, and her kit is almost entirely built around doing damage while toppled. If you have her and a bunch of Bounty Hunters at R5 for some reason, then this is a pretty obvious choice to use one of your topples on. Third is the Vader Newt team. You really ought to use Vader in Phase 1, but if you already invested in Newt and possibly Traya for this team, and you don't have other teams that will benefit more from the topples, then this is a solid topple team. It's all about drawing out the topple as long as possible to stack as many dots as possible before the Rancor can start killing off your team. You need a very slow Thrawn, and a slow Vader is probably best, though there are arguments for a fast Vader. It's definitely on my list to do a guide for this team, but again, I'm not sure when I'll get to it. First up for non-topple teams is Shaak Ti and the 501st. This team doesn't absolutely require a topple to function, but it does much better with a topple, so I would definitely put it first in line for a topple if you have fewer than 2 topple teams. Things still haven't really changed with this team. Try to drag out the fight as long as possible and get off 2 aerial advantages for big damage. It's also best to use this team in Phase 2 because the Rancor starts with Devour off cooldown, so with a restart or 2 you can get him to trigger 5's Sacrifice right off the bat and get your team rolling extra fast. With 2 aerial advantages and topple, you can get between 6 and 7%. Expect only 4% without topple. Next up is any Slacker lineup. This is pretty self-explanatory. If you have Slacker and didn't use him in Phase 1, then any Slacker lineup you have will do just fine in Phases 2 or 3 with or without a topple. Don't bother saving him for Phase 4, he doesn't work there. Know that you will do a % or 2 less damage without the topple. See my previous videos if you want to know more about particular Slacker lineups and how to use them. Third, Jedi without a GL. Jedi do well in Phase 4 if you have a GL to support them, but if you don't have Rey or GL Luke, then you'll do much better with them in Phase 2 or 3. Use a Jedi Knight Luke or Jedi Knight Revan lead with whatever Jedi you have at R5. The more damage dealers the better, and some good RNG with Jolee can let you drag it out for more damage. Jedi Knight Revan lead is better for longer fights, Jedi Knight Luke is better for shorter fights. The best lineup is probably Jedi Knight Revan, Jedi Knight Luke, Gas, Jolee, and Hoda or GK. Phase 4 is now basically just a kitchen sink phase where your entire guild can throw whatever leftover R5 characters you have at it till it's done. However, there are a couple teams that do much better in Phase 4 than other teams. As a rule, these teams will still do better in earlier phases, so if your guild is breezing through CPit and you don't mind Phase 4 taking forever to whittle down, then feel free to use these teams in earlier phases for a higher score. But if your guild is having even a little trouble clearing CPit quickly, then you should probably save these teams for Phase 4. At this point, this mostly comes down to how to split up your Jedi if you have both Rey and JML, which is basically calculus because there are so many possible combinations of Jedi right now. So I'm going to skip right by that and start with a much more fun lineup. First off, we have Rey with Jawas and the Armorer. This lineup can get you 8% in Phase 4 while saving all of your Jedi to use in earlier phases or with Jedi Master Luke. This will net you an overall higher score. So you wonderful people out there who relicked your Jawas, all 3 of you, rejoice, your investment is finally going to pay off. Next, for those same people, as well as those of us who only have JML, the best JML team for Phase 4 is Jedi Knight Luke lead with JML, Jedi Knight Revan, Gas, and Hoda. This will get you 4 to 5% and it's pretty straightforward. See my previous vid on this team. But what if you only have Rey and heaven forbid no Relic 5 Jawas to go with her? Well, in that case, you want this lineup. Jedi Knight Revan lead with Rey, Ki-Adi-Mundi, or Gas if you don't have Cam, Jedi Knight Luke, and Hermit Yoda. This can do 8 to 9% with Gas and even a little bit higher with Cam. You can see my previous vid on this team for more. But now that that's out of the way, what do you do if you have both GLs and no Relic Jawas? How should you split your Jedi? Well, the only way to answer that in a reasonable amount of time is to assume you have all Jedi at R5. Then I'll explain my reasoning and you can figure out your own substitutions. First, Rey. Because Rey can really draw out the fight, this team is going to do wildly better than the JML team. So we want most of our biggest damage dealers here with Rey. We definitely want to go with a Revan lead because his lead does more damage over longer fights. We also want to save Jedi Knight Luke for JML because that is pretty much the only way you can do real damage with JML. But we still have Cam and Gas. Then let's add Hermit Yoda to buff their damage further, add more out-of-turn attacks, and to refill Rey's health so she can keep the team protected. So we end up with Jedi Knight Revan lead, Rey, Gas, Cam, and Hermit Yoda. Second, JML. Now this team is not going to be optimal, period. Jedi can do so much more damage with Rey that we're focusing on that and then just seeing what else we can do with JML. First, we do want a Jedi Knight Luke lead. This doesn't hurt the Rey team much and is the main thing that makes JML do any damage because the only real advantage that JML brings here is that he can go before the Rancor so you can get off a big Heroes Arise right off the bat. Don't expect to do all that much damage after that though. I'm going to assume that Anakin, Ahsoka, General Kenobi, and Shaak Ti were all used elsewhere. That basically leaves us with Jedi Knight Luke and possibly Ezra as damage dealers. Ezra is so squishy as to be practically useless for this, but it's what we have. Now let's add Jolee to give us some potential to drag the fight out long enough to do halfway decent damage, and then Barriss for some health equalization and a little bit of debuff cleanse. This is not a great lineup, but it's what I would be aiming for to get the most out of 2 GL Jedi teams. Now to finish it off with a list of teams that can do around 2% in Phase 4. Again, they should do better in earlier phases, but you need to use something in Phase 4. We have, in no particular order, Sith Empire, General Grievous Droids, Jango Separatists, and CLS Chupio. Each of these teams should be able to get you 2% or maybe a little bit more. And that's it for now. Unless things don't change at all, I'll put out another follow-up video to this next month. If you're looking for info on a specific team, most of my current team guides still hold up with some minor changes and lower damage targets, and you can always ask questions on my Discord server. I've also created an announcement channel on my Discord that I'll keep up to date with current top teams for each phase, so subscribe that channel to your guild's Discord server to keep everyone updated. And as always, if you like my videos, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and support me on Patreon for written guides, mod profiles, and other perks. Or just because you want me to keep making videos. Till next time.
I find your lack of rainbow connection disturbing.